All right, welcome back to another episode of the Kitchen Table Podcast where business gets done. I'm Ken Baden, and today I am super pumped because some of you may or may not know this, but I am a certified NLP practitioner, coach, and I'm certified to do timeline therapy, but I don't profess to be by any means, not that I'm not, I am certified. I did go do the courses, but I haven't used a lot of the tools in about a year or so. So today I'm really excited because we actually have another very accomplished NLP coach, timeline therapist. That's his whole everything. So welcome to the show, Steven Etheridge. How are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm great. Ken, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate all your patience. We had some, my wife, well, actually I can't. That's top secret information that I'm actually not supposed to be talking about. So let's just go back to the show. And Steven, so thank you for being accommodating and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to talk NLP. For those of you who don't know, that's Neuro Linguistic Programming. Think Tony Robbins, Ed Milet. You know, these are all heroes of mine that got me really intrigued. Like, what are these guys doing when they're talking about this or anchoring? And it's just like those concepts really fascinated me. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, Steven.
Great. Me too.
I've been looking forward to this all week, truthfully.
Me too. Thank you. Yeah.
So what's been first and foremost, you know, I know you're super accomplished in NLP and sales trainings. You know, you're writing several books, you told me. How'd you get here? I mean, that's usually the first place we start. I'm really interested to hear if this was something you always kind of wanted to do, or how did this happen?
Well, I've always been very interested in the human mind and how people make decisions. And going back to when I was in college, I was in an advertising class, and the professor was asking people what they would do if they were to market a certain brand. And they were bouncing around all these creative ideas, and it was a lot of guesswork. And I, very shortly after that, had a class in marketing research. And I realized, oh, we don't have to guess. We can ask the market questions and determine what is the right thing to do. So my career started out in marketing research. And then in 1987, I worked for a company called the Gallup Organization, which some of you may know in the audience is really big into human resources and human behavior consulting and training and coaching. And I was asked, at that time, I was in the marketing research side of the business, and I was asked to manage a subcontracting company by the name of Communication Development Incorporated. This company was founded by a world-renowned linguist, Dr. Charles Cleveland. And my boss at Gallup said, this guy's really interesting. He walks into a client based on his research, and he tells them, just change these one or two words in your marketing and watch sales go through the roof. And what he did was he interviewed consumers or businesses, whatever the market was. It could be donors in a fundraising situation. Using in-depth psychological interviewing, he would transcribe the interviews and then submit those transcriptions to computerized content analysis, and he would look for keywords, key phrases, metaphors, symbols, etc., when people were talking about why they did what they do. And he would talk about, this guy, Dr. Cleveland, would talk about these two guys, Bandler and Grindler, as the source of his psychological interviewing methods and his linguistics analysis. And he was getting amazing results. I was very skeptical at first, but when I saw the kind of results he was getting, I became very interested. And then I became motivated to learn more about it, asked him to mentor me, and began to learn what I did not even know at the time was NLP in a marketing communication context. And then later, I went into self-employment in a marketing consulting company. I went back to him. I said, Charles, I'd like to sell what you do. He said, great, come on up to Des Moines, Iowa, and let me take you through my training courses and make sure that you're, most comfortable with it, know everything you need to know to sell it confidently, competently, which I did. And about the time he got ready to turn me loose to go market that, he got really sick and unfortunately passed away. And his business went obviously downhill at that time. In fact, it went out of business for a while. And I had all these tools. And I should back up and give you sort of one example. I could give you many, many examples.
Sure.
in the banking industry, we had a client, they came out with a new deposit product, and their message was to the audience, we pay you more interest. And the expectations, the sales did not meet their expectations. And so Dr. Cleveland, Charles, I call him, he did this research and he found out the word pay at the unconscious mind level means I pay money out of my pocket. The fact that you're communicating in terms of you as the bank paying more interest doesn't matter, because pay at the unconscious mind is a barrier. It's just like you probably remember this idea from your NLP training. If I ask you, or I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant. Please don't. I don't want you to think of a pink elephant. What happens? You get a representation of a pink elephant. The fact that I said don't think of one doesn't matter, because the unconscious mind doesn't register negatives. Whatever is said is what gets represented in the mind. So he came back and said, just change your marketing message from we pay more interest to you earn more interest. Sales went through the roof. And I could give you dozens of examples, but that's just a very simple, easy to understand one. And so before I started my own business, when I left Gallup, I went to work as the head of market research for what was then Holiday Corporation, the parent company of Holiday Inns, and they founded Hampton Inns, Embassy Suites, and Homewood Suites, and bought out Harrah's Casinos. They sold the Holiday Inn brand, spun those other brands off into a new company called the Promise Companies. It's since been absorbed by Hilton, but I was there when they first started Hampton Inn, Embassy Suites, and Homewood Suites, and I was asked to do the positioning to help define those products and market those products for rapid international growth. And I'll tell you a little story, because this is really relevant to this idea of how words matter. The Hampton Inn brand was the first brand in the world to create, first brand in the hotel industry to create a 100% satisfaction guarantee. The message was, if you're not satisfied for any reason, you don't have to pay. Whoops, there's that word again, pay. So I hired Charles to come in and do research, and he basically found out not only is that word pay a problem, but the idea of the guarantee was they wanted, the brand wanted the customer to bring problems forth to them so that they could solve the problem for that client, that guest, and prevent it for the next one. So everybody in the company, from the janitor at the hotel to the front desk to the reservation agent, anybody was empowered to give back that customer's money if they weren't satisfied. Well, Dr. Cleveland found out that not only was the word pay a problem, but the idea of waiting for the customer to bring a problem forth had a psychological barrier, because people did not want to be perceived as they were trying to get one over on the hotel. They just wanted to have a good experience. So long story short, Dr. Kenny, or Cleveland rather, I got another Charles, last name is Kenny. Sometimes I
wasn't sure if you got him confused with me, but
no. There's another Dr. Charles Kenny, who is the founder of the Right Brain People, who's also one of my mentors. And sometimes they just come out, one name comes out differently. Yep. But anyway, so we changed the wording of the 100% satisfaction guarantee so that it started working. And one of the things we said was, you should take the initiative as the hotel employee to ask the guest, is everything all right? Do you have enough towels in your room? How was the coffee this morning? And change the wording of the guarantee from you don't have to pay to we don't expect you to pay. Now, Dr. Cleveland recommended that they say, instead of you don't have to pay, that we will pick up the tab.
There you go, because we can remove pay.
Taking the word pay out, but the clients don't often follow recommendations.
Right.
But it changed just enough, that word expect, somehow we don't expect, changed just enough, along with the training to the employees to take the initiative so that the guests didn't have to feel like they were trying to get one over on the,
sure,
perceived as getting one over on the hotel. That worked, and it actually very, very significantly increased the profitability and growth of the brand. So all of that was kind of going into my experience. I didn't know that Dr. Cleveland was using NLP, but I heard him talk about Bandler and Grindler. Fast forward now to after he's passed away, I started using what I had learned from him in my marketing research and consulting. I would ask the kinds of questions that we we're learning NLP and analyze that using linguistics analysis. And I did things like help George Washington, Mount Vernon Estates break 150-year records in their fundraising. There are many other client cases that I could talk about, and you can go to my website, Ethridge.com, and download some case studies there.
Ethridge.com.
Yes, Ethridge.
Put that on the screen.
So I used NLP in how I asked survey questions of prospective donors and how I analyzed their responses to come up with the messaging for a fundraising campaign that helped George Washington, Mount Vernon Estates break 150-year fundraising records. And I mentioned that there are other case studies on my website, Ethridge.com. You can download a whole, it's like a 50-page document of case studies, and where I've helped clients achieve truly unprecedented returns on their marketing, increases in returns on their marketing, and increases in their marketing return on investment very substantially using NLP in my marketing communication. Well, I still didn't know what NLP was, even though I was using it, because I had been trained by Dr. Cleveland and his methods, which were all based on NLP. So one day, fast forward, I'm reading a business article in some publication. I don't even know, Business Insider or Wall Street Journal.
Sure.
I don't know what it was, but it talked about Bandler and Greenland.
Yeah. And these are the godfathers. I think there was one other of NLP, by the way. If you don't know, that's who he's bringing up.
Yeah, these were the main two founders of Neuro Linguistic Programming back in the early 1970s. And as I was reading this article, I recognized, oh my goodness, this is what I've been doing. These are the two guys Dr. Cleveland used to talk about. This is NLP. There were several of their books mentioned in the article. I thought, I'm going to read everything I can to learn more about this, because I know how powerful it is.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself, this was in the mid 2000s or so. I said, if I ever get the opportunity, I'm going to go get certified and learn more about this. And so 2013 came around, and finally had the time, money to go get certified. And as I researched who I wanted to get certified from, of course, Bandler and Grindler are still alive and doing that. Their trainings were not as easily accessible to me, but there was a guy named Dr. Tad James, who was and he passed away about 3 years ago, but his company is still widely reputed as being one of the best NLP and hypnosis training firms on the planet. And he happens to be the inventor of the registered technique known as timeline therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and got his certification. 2013, I got certified as an NLP practitioner, an NLP coach, which is a different higher level certification, a timeline therapy practitioner, and a hypnotherapist. I went back the next year, got certified in all four of those at the master practitioner level. And then over the next several years, I became certified as a trainer in NLP, trainer in NLP coaching, a hypnosis instructor, and a master timeline therapy trainer, which is the highest level training you can get. During the course of all that training, I began to realize, of course, I knew who Tony Robbins was, but for a while, I didn't even know what he was doing was founded really in NLP. But I learned.
Yeah, I didn't either, by the way, but
I learned how powerfully this set of tools can help change people's life at a personal level. So while all of my career experience up to about 2013 or so had been in marketing, consulting, and research and sales, I averaged about $2 million a year selling in marketing, research, and consulting. And by the way, when I was at Gallup, they modeled excellence in sales. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But long story short, I began to realize how valuable it is to help people, not just organizations. And I realized to whom much is given, much is required. So it helped me personally, and I began to help other people doing various kinds of personal and business development coaching. Now, let me fast forward to what I'm doing now, but I want to put it in context. One of the definitions of neuro-linguistic programming is the study and modeling of excellence. It began in the field of therapy, where they studied excellent therapists and were able to develop, by observing them and asking questions, they were able to develop models of how they were achieving that success. They would install those models in themselves, develop training, and then go train others. But then they also have studied excellence in a wide variety of fields, one of which is sales.
Yeah.
And even before I realized what NLP was, when I was at Gallup, that organization where I was working was in Lincoln, Nebraska. I actually started working for the company that bought out Gallup. It was a company called Selection Research Incorporated, SRI. The selection was based on interviewing and identifying top performers to hire as employees. And the company was founded by two psychology professors at the University of Nebraska who began to study top sales performers in insurance companies. In Lincoln, Nebraska, where that was at the time, and Omaha, there are a lot of insurance companies around there. So they founded the company based upon modeling like top 1% sales performers. And then they would develop interview guides to interview prospective salespeople to identify people who had that same capacity to achieve at that level. In my opinion, that was a type of NLP because it's a study in modeling of excellence. And they knew Dr. Cleveland, who had been trained in NLP. So that was really the root of my experience in studying excellence in sales. The field of NLP, of course, has studied top sales performers and top sales trainers since about the early 1980s. And they have codified that into a sales training called, there's various names, but the one that I learned about is called the NLP 5-step sales process. And I'll talk more about that. But I have developed a sales training course called Sales Mindset Transformation. That's sort of the umbrella name of the course. And it has two modules. The first module is Sales Mindset Transformation, or excuse me, Sales Mindset Self-Mastery.
Mindset is something that is all over every guru, and I don't mean that's a negative connotation, but there are mindset coaches, mindset. I could tell you a few peers of mine and a couple different masterminds I belong to or used to belong to, and it blew me away a little bit to see the success they were having, but they were literally just mindset coaches. And I have to tell you, there was a healthy bit of skepticism in some of that, only at the time, just knowing the individuals, like, really? That's what you're bringing to the table, mindset, right? Like, and I'm not saying I know how important that is, but I love this application of NLP, mindset, anything, because if you're listening to this right now and you're hearing him talk and you don't know what NLP is, all of this is just like, what are we talking about? But I can tell you from my perspective, not being as well versed as he is in NLP, from a sales perspective, from an entrepreneur perspective, like why that was intriguing to me, outside of just the fact that I really admired Tony Robbins and Ed Mylett, and I have ambitions to speak and do those things, and I've done it a few times myself, but that's where I'd like to see myself in the future. That's where I will see myself in the future. But the power of words, the why behind people imagine, if you will, you could understand fully or in a much better, deeper level how people come to make the decisions that they make, how powerful that would be in sales, in entrepreneurship, in leadership. You know what I mean? Like, those are things to me that I was like, wow. I mean, I called it Jedi mind trick stuff, but genuinely, that's why I was intrigued. I wanted to go to the training, and truthfully, Steven, the reason I went was just to learn. I didn't get to do the sales training, unfortunately. And I only say unfortunately because that's why I went, but I did get all of the base level NLP everything, which was just like fire hose stuff. And I even did a breakthrough, which was cool. And that's, I was very interested in being able to work and help other people. But just if you're listening to this and you're like, well, what, how's this? That's how it's relevant. Understanding how people make decisions on the deepest, like literal, how their mind takes them from A to Z in a buying decision. If you could understand and codify that, that is powerful. And you can. I mean, that's where like the sensory language and everyone having the same essential buying formula, every single one is that, and I believe that all, correct me if I'm wrong, has to do with like their sensory based approach to purchasing something, whether it's a peanut or a yacht.
Well, I'm happy to share more about that if you.
Yeah, I'd love to. I want to make sure we talk about your sales training and programming, but I also want to make sure that the listener, this is stuff that I really wanted to invest in and did invest a lot of time, money, and energy into because that's why, right? Like, again, like if I just that line alone, imagine how you could train your reps, your sales reps, how you could train your leaders to get the best out of their folks if they knew, why is this guy or gal making these types of decisions? Well,
Yeah.
or why are they having trouble learning? Well, hey, I can go on a deeper level, understand how this person learns and speak their language. Same with how this person takes criticism or how this person comes to buy something, understanding the depths and powers of the unconscious mind. And Steven, you can answer this, but I remember they gave me an example in training of how much more data the unconscious mind is taking in per, I don't know what the
different studies, but the one I referred to is about 11 million bits per second of information coming into our mind
versus the conscious, which is like,
yeah, and we can only store about 129 bits per second, so we have to delete and distort and generalize to decide. And often the decision is unconscious. So what we store in our unconscious, which typically fits to what we already know and believe, what our attitudes already are. So.
And that's so powerful. Think about that. I mean, so long story short, you are taking in everything around you on an overwhelmingly higher rate than what you're aware of that you're taking in. And unfortunately, storing, if it's the wrong stuff that, if you're not in a place where you want to be, I mean, just you're starting to understand on a higher level, if you're listening to this, why, like, oh, okay, this could be really powerful. Think, like I said, Jedi mind trick applications to both sales and leadership, and being able to, at a deep level, understand all of this. And to me, that was just like, oh, sign me up, dude. Because to your point, Steven, that was why I read a book in sales, and I'm going to get back to what you were just talking about. But where I really fell in love with sales, I love talking to people. I love being around people. I just get energy from being around people. That's just who I am. I am a 99D and 99I on the DISC test. So I'm a prototypical salesperson. However, what really intrigued me was some of these, next level sales concepts, mirroring the DISC method, understanding. And so, like, the DISC method itself is kind of a prologue in a way to deeper understandings of things like that, like NLP, the DISC method, understanding personality types, what's mine, what's theirs, how do I change mine to better appease or reflect theirs, right? How I meet an engineer is not how I'm going to meet someone just like me. We're going to be very different, and I need to change a lot of stuff about my rate of speech, my tonality. And so understanding all of these things takes you from, like, I don't know, rookie salesperson to next level Jedi. So if you want to be that in leadership and entrepreneurship and sales, I suggest strongly that you listen. And we would be doing our listeners, you and myself, even a disservice if you don't know what I'm talking about. The reason why I'm so excited and why you've heard me be so quiet, which is probably not common, is because I am truly intrigued by, like, this whole, it's just so interesting to me. And as I was saying, I read a book that just talked about the DISC method, and that took my sales career from 60+% to 80% closing, which is damn good. Just better understanding that I can't be the same me every time I show up. I have to meet somebody where they're at. I've got the mirroring. The first time, Steven, I did one of these and then, moved that, and then they did it, and I was like, holy crap, they did it. It worked. I mean, I was just so hooked, and so if that's you, I suggest, you lean in a little bit, maybe bust out a notepad, because this stuff is next level. But please continue. You have a sales mastery. You have a sales mastery training that starts with the first, what would you call it? The
self-mastery. And it might be helpful for the listeners to get this definition of NLP. Neuro Linguistic Programming. The word neuro is about our mind-body system. Our mind is not just in our brain, but we have muscle memory, for example. It's all throughout our body. Linguistics is the language we use to communicate with ourselves in terms of, are we doing positive thinking or negative thinking, for example, and communicating with others. Everything we do as humans, we do it in terms of representing something in our mind, either as what we see, hear, feel, taste, or smell. So that's the programming code. When Richard Bandler and John Grinder founded NLP, Bandler was a computer programmer and mathematician. And they sort of had this idea that this was back in the early 70s when PC computers were first coming out. They had this idea that if we can program these boxes to do amazing things, and the human mind is a type of software, why can't we figure out what kinds of programs we're running in our minds? And if they're not helpful or desirable outcomes, reprogramming our minds. So neuro is the mind-body system, linguistics is the language we use, and programming is that idea of figuring out what kind of programs we're running to get whatever outcomes we're getting. And if we want different or better outcomes, reprogramming our own mind or programming our coaches, as a coach, our client's mind. Now, in terms of this sales training, the reason that I included the sales mindset self-mastery as the first module is I talked to a lot of salespeople. And ever since COVID, when things sort of shut down, and then we've been in several years of inflation since then, salespeople always experience rejection, but they've experienced a lot more rejection over the last several years for those reasons. Corporations have cut budgets. They're very much more scrutinizing budgets. Households have cut budgets. So salespeople have been, this is my word, not a lot of what salespeople would say, but they've been beat up worse than normal. So that has caused many of them to have negative emotions about sales, to have like anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt for their lack of success. They feel less competent. They feel less confident. They feel less motivated. And so if you're going to be successful in sales, you've got to get your mind right first. So this first module of my training starts with framing some ideas that help people sort of think right, one of which is the empowerment model of being at cause for all the results in our lives, rather than being victims of something like the economy or the budget, for example. We do some framing, and then I teach them how to get motivated. All you have to do to get motivated is remember a time that you were motivated. Go back to that time. Imagine going back to that time, floating down into your body, seeing through your mind's eye and seeing what you saw, hearing what you heard, feeling what you felt that time you were really motivated, and just sort of relish in that for a moment. And you can get motivated whenever you want to. And then teach them how to anchor themselves. Anchoring is a big deal. And
oh, dude, I was hoping you'd bring that up. That's my favorite thing. I have to reprogram mine, man. I haven't. I don't know. Anyhow, we'll talk offline. And for those of you who don't know, anchoring is quite literally what he just said. Like, to think of if you could just press a part on your body, your anchor, whether it's your earlobe or for me, my index knuckle, and feel that rush of enthusiasm, or I don't know, being profoundly proud, whatever that emotion is that you're trying to store. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah,
Can you touch on that a little bit? I'd love to. I mean, that's
sure,
such
I'll talk
a cool
about it.
thing.
So anchoring is based on the idea of classical conditioning from Pavlov's dogs. Many of you may have heard of that, where
Yes.
a scientist would ring a bell, he would put out meat, and dogs would come to salivate, right? And he would do that over and over and over. And eventually he could ring the bell that would salivate even if he didn't put out meat. And so while humans are much more higher beings than dogs, we're still mammals, right? So we can anchor things. We have anchors all around us. Like, for example, a song comes on the radio that reminds you of a good time you had back in high school or college, and you kind of feel upbeat, right? Or someone says something in a certain tone of voice, could be positive or negative, and you get triggered one way or the other based on what that tone means to you. Red lights, green lights, alarm clocks, all kinds we have anchors all around us. So what anchoring does is it allows you to remember a specific time when you felt a certain way: happiness, motivation, confidence, competence, laughter, whatever state that is resourceful for you. And as you remember that, you associate something with that. It could be physical, it could be a sound, it could be a gesture. But typically the way it's trained is you would do something like you said, you would touch your knuckle, or you would pull your earlobe, or you would do your hand like this, or touch your chest, or something unique that you don't normally do, because if you do something you normally do,
right,
fire it when you don't want to. But you hold that anchor. Let's say I'm just going to touch my chest. As that state begins to rise, you set that anchor, and then when that state gets right before it's about to peak, you let it go. And you do that on any particular state, like motivation, for example, about 5 times. And then you can clear your state of mind, think about something different, and then go back and touch that, and you'll go immediately into that state of mind. And in NLP, we have what's called stacking anchors, where you could stack on top of one another on one location, whatever you decide to do. multiple states like motivation, confidence, competence, feeling cool, calm, and collective when you're in front of a sales prospect, so that when you need those states, when you need those resources, all you have to do is fire that anchor and bang. You've got all those resources right there that you need when you walk into that sales situation.
That's badass. I did not realize you could stack on the same anchor.
Yeah. So the same spot, stack different states, and then you
Okay.
have all these positive resources right there.
I mean, think about that. If you're like, I don't know, you need to calm down and you just spend time, like in that book I was talking about. I mean, it talks about how to do it with somebody, and you take them through a time when they felt X, and you do it, like you said, I think it's like 3 or 5 times, get them really, then fire. There's another time you felt really excited, fire. And then,
Exactly.
but to be able to do that, like you're in a house with a person, you're getting a little, they're beating you up maybe, and you need to calm down to be able to just push your knuckle, push your chest, and it works. It really works. It really does work.
It sounds a little bit weird and hokey if you hadn't experienced it, but
It does. It does.
like athletes anchor themselves all the time. A baseball player at the bat, sometimes you'll see them sort of hit the bat against their cleats. That's their anchor for hitting a good hit. Or basketball, they bounce and then they look up and they were doing a free throw shot. They're anchoring themselves when they do that. But also, I'm going to talk in a minute, if we have time, about how you anchor your sales prospect into desirable states.
We will make sure we have time. So hold on. In fact, I'm going to save that because I would be, you've been so kind. That is a great nugget. I mean, that's all. So that alone, if you got to hang on to the end now to find out how to anchor your sales product, your prospect. I don't know that, so I want to know. So I'm putting that right here. All right, anchor sales prospect. That's the. Are you cool with that? We can end with that. That way, that's a nice, delicious nugget for them to take with us, because we still got to go back to, you've got this course. And look, if you see where the value is here, we're not even here selling anything, by the way. This is always, come on, bring value. They've got a book. My guests are highly accomplished folks. They're authors or they have sales courses, whatever. But this stuff is just really intriguing to me, so I could talk about this all day. But in fairness, let's make sure that we talk about your sales course. First, you start with mindset. That is the first module. What's the second module, if you will?
Well, if I may, I want to mention a few more very important things about
Sure, please.
I mentioned that how a lot of salespeople are rejected and they don't feel, like they have the competence or confidence they had before. So I use timeline therapy to help them very rapidly release any negative emotions like rejection or sadness or fear or anxiety that are weighing them down, hindering their ability to succeed. And I use timeline therapy to help them release limiting beliefs. An example of a limiting belief would be something like, I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't feel like I can anymore. That would be a type of limiting belief that could be holding someone back, like having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, so to speak. So we get rid of those hindrances to sales. And then we use a process that is based in timeline therapy called the Creating Your Future coaching process, where we help a person write out goals in a well-formed way, linguistically, such that it can be implanted into the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind helps support the person in achieving the goal. My example is, if you ever been thinking about a problem or a question when you fall asleep at night, and you fall asleep thinking about it, the next morning you're not even thinking about it, and all of a sudden, bang, the answer sort of pops into your mind. That's because when you were falling asleep thinking about it, your conscious mind was telling your unconscious mind, I need an answer, I need a solution. And the unconscious mind wants to serve you, but it needs direction, which in that example, thinking about it, falling asleep, gives direction. I help you set goals in your unconscious mind in a similar way so that the unconscious mind knows what you're trying to achieve, brings up milestones, next steps, things that you can do to move you toward achieving that goal. I've seen people triple their sales. I've seen people get out of huge amounts of debt. They didn't even know how they were going to do it in a short period of time. NLP can even be used for health and relationships. It's pretty almost kind of miraculous, in the power of it. So that's module 1, sales mindset, self-mastery, getting your mindset right to be successful in sales. Module 2 is the NLP sales skills mastery. And I teach based on my own experience in selling about $2 million a year in marketing research over 4 decades, and what I've learned from modeling excellence in sales as well as what I've learned from the field of NLP, which has modified a lot of top sales performers. I've got this training that's 5 steps. And I'll tell you what the steps are, which sound kind of intuitive. The magic is in the detail of what I teach within each step. I'll give you a little taste of that, but it's a 24-hour training over several days. So I can't go into all of it. But the first step is to establish rapport. The idea being that people who are like each other. And you mentioned mirroring, for example, where you mirror the other person's physiology, their voice, their breathing, lots of different things that you can mirror to get into unconscious rapport with them. And then you can test to see whether you're in rapport by changing something different and seeing if they follow you. And if they do, then you can begin to lead them like you want to lead them. So that's called pacing and leading. And so rapport is, unlike a lot of people who they think about rapport, they might say, oh, I see you have a degree on your wall. I went to that university as well, or something kind of surface level. This is really deep level unconscious rapport. I can tell you some amazing stories about how just that alone can help you be very successful. In fact, I would say it is the most important thing.
Yeah.
You don't have rapport, nothing else really matters.
I couldn't agree more. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. And if you don't get to that without I'm so glad you said that, because I teach my folks and I live on rapport. I'm like, if you get anything right, overcoming objections, all that stuff, that's so important. Sure, that's an excellent closer, but you don't get there. Like, some of the best do it here. Like, this is where you don't get there if you don't get here. Like, you have to start here. It's one of my first steps, and it's like, this is just so important. I've sold most of my deals here, well before I got to laying off price or closing.
Yeah. So the second step is to ask questions. Now, most people, when I ask them if they're in sales, I'll say, so what's the reason for asking questions in a sales context? They'll say, well, it's to uncover the need or the problem. And that's about as far as they go. And that's correct. You want to uncover the need or the problem state, the real problem. And in NLP, I teach you how to not only ask questions to uncover the need, but also how to ask questions to uncover the unconscious motivations that a person has for buying. And not only that, but the language that you need to use so that when you communicate to them, you're communicating their language, you're talking their language to their unconscious mind. And let me back up and say, all of this is with integrity. Sometimes people will say, well, is NLP manipulative? And my answer is, first of all, the root word of sales, the Norwegian root word, means to serve. So everything that I train and do is service oriented with high integrity. So yes, it is persuasion. Yes, it is influence. But if someone doesn't have a need for what your product or service has to offer, then just thank them for their time, maybe ask for a few referrals and move on. We don't want to sell anybody anything that they don't need. Yeah. Right. But so step 2 is asking questions, and we uncover the need. We also uncover their preferred representational system, whether they are a visual person, an auditory person, a kinesthetic person, or what they call auditory digital, which is self-talk, because you want to communicate to them in their language. So if someone is a visual person and they tend to say things like, show me your proposal, for example, versus someone else who says is an auditory person, they might say, tell me what you have to offer. Show versus tell. Show is visual and tell is auditory. So if you present your offer in auditory language to a visual person or vice versa, it's going to fall flat. And in the training, I'll actually say, I'll get students as a group to get in small groups, and I'll say to one person now, present to your role-played prospect 2 offers, one in their preferred rep system and one not in their preferred rep system. And you can just see the person, when they hear the one that's not in their rep system, their facial expression is kind of like, I don't get it. I don't, it doesn't mean anything to me. You present it to them in their preferred rep system, and they'll go, hey, that sounds great. And it can be a hypothetical kind of an offer. In fact, Dr. Tad James, who trained me in this, says there's no content worth knowing. And that's a little bit of a hyperbole in my opinion. But the point is, it matters more how you say something than what you say in terms of someone's responsiveness to it. So I teach you how to ask questions to uncover the need, uncover their preferred rep systems, also to uncover their values in the context of this buying decision. For example, if someone's buying a car, their value might be keeping their family safe, just as one example. It could be that their one value is good gas mileage. So I teach you how to uncover their values and to conversationally understand what is the rank order of those values in terms of their priority. And again, you can present something that's not in their values and watch them kind of fall flat the way their facial expression is, or you can present it within their values and they'll get all excited about it. I also teach how to uncover their decision-making or buying strategies. A strategy in NLP is the process that people go through toward that decision, so that when you present the offer, you present it in that same sequence of the way they think, right? Any other sequence is not going to work as well.
No.
And I also teach how to ask questions to uncover what in NLP are known as meta programs. These are hidden unconscious filters that determine what we do. I'll give you a perfect example. My favorite example is I do a lot of work training real estate agents. So if I'm a real estate agent and you're a prospect and I say to you, so what kind of house do you want to buy? Or where do you want to buy a house? And one person says, well, I'd like to not be in the downtown area where there's a lot of concrete and traffic noise and sirens and potential crime. You ask another person, so what kind of house do you want to buy or where do you want to live? What kind of area do you want to live in? They say, well, I'd like to be out in the suburbs where I can take my kids and my dog to the park. There's not a lot of traffic or sirens and it's free of crime. Well, the first person gave you away from motivation language. I don't want to be in these situations. The other person gave you toward motivation language. So if I present my offer to a person who has a toward motivation using away from language, it's going to fall flat and vice versa. So imagine how powerful it is if you're presenting your offer in such a way that you're matching your offer to their needs. You're speaking in their language of the preferred representation system. You're speaking in the language of their rank order of their values. You're presenting your offer in the sequence of thinking that they go through, their strategies in making a buying decision. And you're using their meta programs. There's about 64 of these. There's about 8 of them that are really critical in sales. Any one of those you could test and present an offer that's not in their language and they want to be appealing and it is in their language, it will be. So imagine how powerful it is when you do all 4 of those together. So actually 5, counting the needs. So step 2 is asking questions and understanding what those motivations are. Step 3 is presenting your offer in a way that matches their needs within their language on those 4 criteria that I mentioned: the rep systems, the values, the meta programs, and the strategies. And then the next step, step 4, is overcoming objections. Now, I will tell you that if the person's qualified, if you've got good rapport, if they truly have a need and a capacity to buy, objections aren't very, very often occurring, because at that point, you pretty much, it's sold itself because you're in rapport, you're communicating their language, and your product or service meets their needs. But we do teach how to reframe and how to overcome objections. They're different depending on the kind of objection they are. And then we teach some closing skills. So those are the 5 steps: getting rapport, asking questions to uncover the needs and the unconscious motivations in the language, presenting your offer in a way that matches their needs and their language and motivations, overcoming objections, and closing the sale. So the total training that I offer is 24 hours. The first 10 hours is the mindset self-mastery, and the next 14 hours is the NLP sales skills mastery.
Wow.
And so it's very powerful. I've seen people, triple their sales in a very short period of time. It's just amazing how powerful this is. And I want to emphasize again, it's all with integrity. My intention is not to teach people how to manipulate or overload somebody.
Which I get. I mean, I get the disclaimer because somebody doesn't understand it could hear, but if they don't have a need, you shouldn't be there anyhow, right? So, but I do appreciate you doing that. And I mean, 24 hours, that's pretty damn cool. I had to do 5 days, and I want to say they were like 10, 12. It was ridiculous. I was,
Long days in NLP
yeah,
training.
I was beat up. So 24 hours isn't bad, which is great for us salespeople. It's a lot of bandwidth we're using, but that's awesome, man. I mean, I love this stuff, and if you're in sales or if you're even an entrepreneur, man, and you want to know how to better communicate to your people or get better results out of your people, either you do this training or seek someone like hear myself out, not myself, but he out to find out more about and learn NLP or not, at least like look into the base level concepts, because I'm telling you, you're really shooting yourself short if you're not able to speak better to somebody on a deeper level. You're just, some of the things he was saying, I mean, think about that. I mean, if you're able to you teach all these salespeople, if you're able to figure out like, well, how does this person versus this person versus this person learn what I'm teaching, and I can speak to their sensory-based language or whatever, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to know that? You know what I mean? Like, that was what really was powerful for me. It was like, man, I can use this in a lot more ways than just what I thought, which was selling. So I really dig it, and I love the anchoring. That was my favorite part of not only the training, but getting to experience it. You mentioned, now that we've gone through your training, the ability to anchor your prospect. Please elaborate, because I am very intrigued as to what you mean.
So I'll give you an example. This is a sort of a classic training example. You could change the context, but let's say, for example, you are selling automobiles and you have a prospect on the lot and you're sort of getting to know them, what their needs are, and you're just having a casual conversation, and you say something like, so have you ever bought a car that you really didn't like? Maybe it was a lemon. And your purpose of asking that question is to get them to start talking about that and to go into temporarily sort of a negative state of mind, to associate them into a past problem state. And by the way, we teach what's called sensory acuity, which is the ability to observe someone in their microfacial expressions, their body language, their posture, their breathing, et cetera, so that you can calibrate between when they're in a negative state of mind or a positive state of mind. So you're looking for what they look like when they're in a negative state of mind. When they do that, you might just do something like that as you're talking to them.
Click your pen.
Yeah. Or cough, or, use a certain tone of voice. And then later on, you say, well, have you ever bought a car that you really love that fit your needs? Oh, yeah. And they start talking about that. And you see their facial expression and everything. Maybe it's a one click. Okay. So you do that kind of thing at least once, but if you can, several times. Just observe them, and every time they say something kind of negative, wow. Every time they say something positive, great. You see what I'm doing? So that when you get ready to close the sale, you fire the positive anchor. And if by chance they say, well, I think I'm going to go shop your competition, I may be back. Okay. Fire their negative anchor as they walk out of the pot.
And you used one click versus two, or okay.
Yeah. And you can
just to be clear, but he's not using the same, because you mentioned stacking earlier. He's talking like, hey, I might click a pen. Could you like maybe click a pen versus cough to distinguish between the two? Okay.
You could. And in fact, that may be, even a better, more distinctive way of doing it. I was just using a quick illustration.
Right. Understood. They can't see you. Well, YouTubers will be able to see you, but if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or any of the streaming services, you can't see him clicking the pen. So he was clicking it once for negative, twice for positive, but that's really cool.
I've had it work just with the click of a pen. I've used clearing my throat, coughing, changing your tone of voice. You could even say a word like "wow," or
right.
Anything. Anchoring can occur in any sense modality. It can be a touch, it can be a sound, it can be a gesture that they see. As long as you do the same thing for the same state, then it will work.
Does it help if you get it more than one time? Like, I know when we're trying to anchor, it's like 3 to 5 or whatever. 5, you just said 5. Do you want to try to get 5 different examples, or if you can, or is that pushing it?
Well, it depends on your rapport and how the relationship is going. But I will say that typically we do 5 instances of a particular state to really set the anchor strongly.
Sure.
Okay. But, think about comedians anchor all the time. Now, I'm not a comedian, so I don't know that I can come up with a great example off the top of my head, but they'll use a facial expression or pause.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
how they get a lot of laughter, is that they set something up and they kind of set the anchor, and then they come back later and do something similar and everybody laughs.
It almost becomes like that's interesting. Like that facial expression almost becomes like a applaud neon sign. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So this
really
stuff is
interesting.
all around us, really. I mean, it happens naturally, but then if you know how to do it consciously, conscious communication is what really makes
Mhm.
you excel. To be able to know what you're doing, when you're doing it, why you're doing it for a particular desirable outcome.
I just think that's so cool, man. I really, I could talk to you all day. I want to make sure I don't. First of all, where can our where can our listeners find you if they want to reach out to you, whether for your sales training or just to reach out and try to learn more about NLP? Where can they find you?
So I'm going to give you three places. One is my main website, ethridge.com, ethridge.com.
Okay.
That lists all the kinds of services that I offer. It has some case studies in marketing and so forth. Then the second one I will give you is contact.ethridge.com. That is a landing page that gives you a high-level summary of the kinds of skills that I give you and talks about the content of the two modules of the training, the sales mindset self-mastery and the NLP sales skills mastery. That gives you a high-level overview of that. And on that page, my Calendly link pops up. So when you go there and read about that, if you want to schedule a time for a free consultation or to learn more about my sales training, ask me more about it or sign up for it, you can book a meeting with me at contact.ethridge.com. My Calendly link is there. And I have different kinds of meetings there that you can choose from. And different links of meetings. And then the third place is I'm going to give you my cell phone number. You text me or call me anytime. And that is, of course, I'm in the US, so it's +1, and then area code 901, and then 331-7026, 901-331-7026. That is my personal cell phone number. I use it for business and personal. It's the only phone number that I've got. Well, I do have another one set up on one of my landing pages that comes into a CRM, but this is the one I prefer to use.
7026-901-331-7026.
Yes.
I'm putting it on the screen, as I'm sure Paulo will make sure he
text
does.
me, call me, leave a voicemail. I will get back to you within 24 hours.
Just texted because I want to chat with you more after the show. I love this stuff, guys. If you're listening, I don't know. Like, I hope I did a good enough job. I know I was a little quiet. They tell me to be a good podcast host, it's 75 over here, but I love learning from. This is just, I don't know what else to say. If you're really into sales, you're really into being a leader, an entrepreneur, to be able to understand how people make decisions and how to better appeal to somebody, or to think about how he explained NLP, period. Just, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, the brain, which is in a sense an organic computer, could be just reprogrammed? You don't like the programming you're running? Just reprogram it.
Yeah. NLP is
The
the
idea that's
language of
real.
the mind that leads to your results. It's the language of the mind that leads to the results.
So thank you so much for coming in. I love NLP. I really enjoy just all of this. Is just so fascinating to me. So I could listen to you all day. That's why I just shot you a text. I hope to speak to you again very soon. And, I don't know, as I was saying, just learning how to reprogram your brain, or what I did. Perhaps you want to be a coach and you're thinking, well, why would I do that? Well, my intention wasn't originally to do that, but I was just thinking when he was saying this, why don't I take the time to refresh my stuff and remove limiting beliefs from my salespeople? Why am I not doing that? Why, if I have the ability, am I not taking that book? You know what I mean? Like, that's the money spent right there. Like, dude, you have your own. I don't need to go be, Mr. Coach Guy or whatever when I have my company right here, right now, my roofing remodeling company with salespeople that are needing my help now that I'm not helping. So I am going to rectify that, and I'm going to start utilizing my NLP training right here in-house and put my guys getting their negative and limiting beliefs and eliminating that negative self-talk, because that's what I was just talking about. Words are powerful. Do not, what do they always say? Do you ever say this? Do you ever catch yourself saying that? If you accidentally say that, like, oh, I reject that, or I don't receive
delete,
that.
reject, eliminate. Yeah.
Delete, reject, eliminate.
Words
So,
come along. And by the way, if I may say, I also certify people up to the master's level, master practitioner level, as in NLP
okay.
practitioner, NLP coaching, hypnosis, and timeline therapy. So I'm trainer.
Oh, wow. All the way up to hypnosis and everything? Well, you're the highest level you can possibly be, so I would imagine. But so if you're interested in learning this, what I did, there you go. So, I mean, that's super cool. We gave you 3 ways to do it, including a cell phone number, which is very interesting, but I took it. So, look, Steven, thank you so much for coming on. I loved this episode. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it too, and I seriously hope you use some of this. Look it up. Apply it. Use it. Leaders, entrepreneurs, salespeople, there's a deeper connection waiting for you. I hope you guys dug this. I know I did. We will see you next time. God bless.